Okay, I think we're going to get started and as people come in. So thank you for joining us. It's a beautiful day out. We're very appreciative of you spending your time with us today, given how glorious a day it is. So for those that don't know me, I'm David Knapp. I'm the program director for the New York City Department for the Aging Bill Payer Program, and I work inside of our special Elder Justice Unit. We help with fraud, exploitation, prevention, and things related to older adults and scams and fraud. So we want to thank you again for tuning in and giving us your valuable time. Today we're in for a real treat. We have the pleasure to welcome back for the second time, Gary Brown, to chat with us. Gary is the Assistant Attorney General for New York State Attorney General's Office for Westchester. And he's here to update us on Smart Senior Program Preventing Fraud and Exploitation. Before we get started, I just want to mention that this webinar is being recorded. I'll mention that several times. It will also be available 3 or 4 days after today's presentation, and you'll get a link to view it along with lots of materials that will be presented today. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Commissioner of New York City Department for the Aging, Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, for some pre-recorded opening remarks.
Good afternoon. I'm Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, Commissioner of the New York City Department for the Aging. I'm very excited to welcome you to this new virtual series, Meet the Expert. This series focuses on an important issue, which is your financial health, your financial empowerment, your financial literacy, and also giving you tools to combat financial fraud. Like physical health, financial health is a cornerstone of living a happy, successful, relaxed life. With increased financial wellness, individuals can enjoy retirement and be better prepared for life's unexpected challenges. At the core of financial health is knowledge and empowerment. Many times there are financial issues that older adults in New York face that on the surface seem daunting, like, should I file for bankruptcy? How does a reverse mortgage work? Knowledge encompasses one's life's goals, challenges, and available financial resources are here to help you. Those experiencing financial wellness often experience a greater sense of empowerment, reduce stress, and improve physical health. A house is only as strong as its foundation. Finances underlie each one of our daily lives, and it is important for us to create a space, a safe space, where you can ask experts your most important questions. And that is why we designed the Meet the Expert series. Often people just don't know that these services exist to address their major concerns. This series is meant to replicate an intimate in-person chat. Through these series, you're going to get expert advice on things that are part of our daily lives, choosing the right financial institution, when to seek out a financial advisor, the latest online smart budgeting tool. I'm looking forward to learning about that one. The do's and don'ts of refinancing your home, and online banking security, and the recent COVID-19, those many scams and schemes that have emerged, just to name a few. Our goal is to help you to get to answer your questions and on all of those pressing financial needs. Hopefully, you will get the information that you need, access to an expert, as well as a few new tips on how to use these valuable resources that you're getting. Join us, join the series. I'd like to thank PSS for helping us pilot this new series. Hope to see you at the Meet the Expert series. Enjoy it, and we will test and see how safe and secure you feel after this series. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Lorraine. Before I introduce our main speaker, I'd like to remind everyone to use the chat box to ask any general questions. We have staff monitoring those questions. There's the Q&A section as well as the chat. You can put questions in either one and we'll get back to you. As a rule, please keep your questions brief and general. Our experts will not be giving specific individual legal or financial advice. So please make your question general. If you have a specific question that you'd like Gary to answer, leave your information and we will definitely link you with Gary. Once again, we're recording the webinar live. At the end of the presentation, there'll be plenty of time for everyone to ask their questions. So without further ado, before we start, I just wanted to update people. We have a fantastic three-part series coming up. June 30th, Medicare versus Medicaid, featuring Anna Arliano and Valerie Bogart. And then they're coming back for myths and facts about Medicaid and how to apply for Medicaid in NYC. Please tell all of your friends about that one. And then we have the treat of having Taya Bishop from NILAG come and talk specifically about pooled income trusts and Medicaid eligibility. So we look forward to that. So for those of you that don't know, we have the pleasure today of having Gary Brown speak with us. Gary grew up in the Upper West Side, attended PS 145. He graduated Hamilton College in '72 and Brooklyn Law School in '79. He can tell you all of the other interesting facts. The thing that I think is most relevant probably for Gary this year is that Bill Bradley, iconic New York Knick who had a career in the U.S. Senate, even ran for president, was his childhood hero. And this is the rebirth and the re-year of the Knicks. So I'm sure he's very happy about that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gary Brown. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, David, and hi, everybody. It's great to be here. On behalf of the Attorney General, Letitia James, I thank you for giving me the opportunity and for tuning in. What I'm going to do today at the outset is go through the types of complaints we've seen the most of at the Attorney General's office during the pandemic. And then I'm going to go through the classic scams. Some of them have been around for a while. We've seen some twists on those scams. And I'm going to hopefully give you news you can use to stay safe in your daily lives so that you won't become a victim. But let me just backtrack for a minute and go back to March and April of 2020. The pandemic had struck. And over the course of the next few months, we got at the Attorney General's office over 7,700 price gouging complaints. Remember how hard it was to get toilet paper, paper towels, bleach, disinfecting wipes, eggs, just to name a few items. We wound up issuing over 1,900 cease and desist letters to businesses and wholesalers to get them to stop it. The number of price gouging complaints we've received dropped dramatically last summer and has stayed low, I think, for two main reasons. One is that manufacturers ratcheted up their production of these items that were in such great demand. And the second reason is that we're just not buying as much. We're not panic buying and hoarding as much as we were. But we're still on the lookout for it at the Attorney General's office. So for example, there was the ransomware attack a couple of weeks ago on the Colonial Pipeline that was feared would cause gasoline price gouging in New York. It didn't, but we were on the ready in case that it did. And just quickly, just so you understand how the New York price gouging law works, under normal conditions, most retailers and wholesalers can charge whatever they want. We don't regulate prices. But when there's an abnormal disruption of the market, such as caused by a strike, a storm, a pandemic, then prices cannot be charged that are unconscionably excessive. That's the word in the statute. You can't charge unconscionably excessive prices. Certainly, the pandemic caused a major disruption in the market for many products, and that was the trigger for us to take action. Another type of complaint that we got a lot of, have gotten a lot of during the pandemic, are what we're calling refund cancellation complaints. These are people who booked venues for events, bought tickets for events that never went off, and now they're having trouble getting their money back. And so if you're in that situation, you booked a venue for a wedding or a bar mitzvah or whatever, or you bought tickets to an event that never happened, and now you can't get your money back, I would encourage you to reach out to the Attorney General's office. David, maybe you can put our phone number in the chat. It's 1-800-771-7755, or you can reach us on the web at ag.ny.gov. If you're in that situation where you can't get a refund for a canceled service or product that you ordered, please reach out to us. We'll do our best to help you and to try to get you your money back. We also saw a lot of scams that the Attorney General likes to refer to as fake lotions and potions. The Federal Trade Commission has sent warning letters to hundreds of companies and individuals that are advertising fake cures, fake treatments, fake preventative therapies for COVID-19. And many of these products and services are aimed at older adults since they're more vulnerable to COVID and more likely to have underlying medical conditions that put them at greater risk. The vast majority of these have been taken down. Among the products that were being sold on a phony basis as being a therapy or treatment or cure for COVID were cannabinol, colloidal silver, intravenous vitamin C therapy, chiropractic, electromagnetic field therapy, etc. There was a company in Texas that was claiming that its mare's milk, that's horse milk, could help people recover from COVID-19. There was a company in Canada that was claiming that its tea could prevent COVID-19. Radio talk show host Alex Jones was hawking a super blue toothpaste. Televangelist Jim Baker was hawking a silver solution. All of these were products that were being touted as a treatment or cure for COVID. And luckily, we've been able to put a stop to that type of marketing. If there's one complaint that we've received a lot of, and this has been one of our leading complaints at the New York AG's office, it's been the leading complaint received by the Federal Trade Commission during the pandemic. It's been online shopping, right? We're all doing so much online shopping, but sometimes we're ordering products and we pay for them and they never arrive. And so the classic online shopping tips apply more than ever. And before I get to those, I just should mention that the one area where we've seen a particular number of complaints about online purchases are people who tried to buy pets during the pandemic. So a lot of people who wanted to take on a dog in particular, maybe a cat, they went online, they made payment, and the pet never arrived. So if you're going to buy a pet, you may want to do so locally, go to the breeder, see the animal before you purchase it. But if you do purchase it online or purchase anything online, always pay by credit card so that if you don't receive the product, you can dispute the charge and you can get a charge back. If you pay by debit card, the money will be withdrawn from your account the moment the transaction is executed. If you pay by credit card, there's about a month or so till you get your next bill, then you get 2 or 3 more weeks to pay it. It buys you some time between the date of the transaction and the date you have to pay to see, by then you can hopefully see whether or not you've gotten the product. And even if you paid by credit card and you then realize, I never got the product or I never got the service, the credit card companies are really good about giving you a charge back. They're almost never going to make you pay or not give you a charge back for a product you never received. But again, if you use a debit card, you're in the much worse position of trying to get your money back because it will have already been withdrawn the moment the transaction was executed. Another type of complaint that we've gotten a ton of during the pandemic are from people who got a letter from the New York State Department of Labor about the unemployment insurance claim that they never filed. In other words, there are thousands and thousands of false unemployment claims being filed. The good news is that in very, very few cases of this happening is the Department of Labor actually making payment on these false claims. The bad news, though, is if you get a letter like this, and thousands of New Yorkers have, it means that a scammer had your name, your address, and most importantly, had your social security number. So you need to go into identity theft prevention overdrive, do things like freeze your credit report, check your credit report, change your passwords, etc. The Federal Trade Commission has a great website called identitytheft.gov. That's identitytheft as one word, .gov, which has step-by-step instructions on what to do if you get one of these letters from the Department of Labor that means your social security number has been compromised. When vaccines first became available a few months ago, and it was very hard to get an appointment, we saw a lot of vaccination scams. Scammers were claiming that for a fee, they could jump the line for you, help you get an appointment that you couldn't otherwise get. Of course, anyone who asks for a payment to put you on a list to get a COVID vaccination or to pay for a COVID vaccination is a scammer because there's no fee. That scam has kind of died down in recent weeks because the availability of the vaccination has become so much more widespread. But what we are seeing online and on social media are people who are selling fake counterfeit vaccination cards. And it's kind of a scary thought. You want to be able to rely on someone's vaccination card to mean that they really were vaccinated. The thought of counterfeit cards being sold is really alarming. And if there's one point I would make, we're not seeing too much of it anymore, but when the vaccinations first became available, a lot of people were posting selfie photos on social media of themselves holding up the vaccination card, which was really not a good idea for 2 reasons. One is it's got your name and your date of birth and could potentially be used by someone to commit identity theft against you. But the more important reason is that it's got other information on there, like where you got the shot and the type of injection you got and the model, the lot number of the injection, that scammers are using that data to fill out these fake vaccination cards. So you want to keep that to yourself. If you do post the selfie of yourself holding a vaccination card, blur it, put your fingers over the key data, Don't just broadcast it for anyone on the internet to see. Now, the classic scams I'm now going to talk about, some of them have been around for a while. Some of them are new twists on old scams. But I just want to start out by saying that one of my titles at the Attorney General's office, as you heard David say, is that I'm the statewide elder abuse coordinator. And the reason that position was created is a recognition of the fact that there are so many scams and frauds targeting older adults. For the most part, as you're going to hear me explain, unfortunately, we cannot catch the bad guys. Even more rarely can we recover money for victims. But these are preventable scams if people know how they work. And so we have done a lot of outreach, and we've ratcheted up our outreach and prevention efforts to make sure that the word is getting out, such as through programs like this today. Seniors are often targeted for financial exploitation, for identity theft, for telemarketing, and sweepstakes frauds, for home improvement ripoffs. And with so many seniors using the internet, online scams are becoming an increasing concern. How much money gets stolen every year from elderly New Yorkers? It's estimated that $1.5 billion a year is lost to elder financial fraud in New York State alone every year. And that figure is a really low ball figure anyway, because only 1 in 44 victims of elder financial fraud ever report it. They keep it to themselves. And so if we could estimate 1.5 billion from people who came forward, the real number is undoubtedly much higher. Why are elderly victims reluctant to tell anyone that happened? If your car gets stolen, right, you call the police. If your house got burglarized, you call the police. But if a scammer tricks you over the phone and gets you to send money by buying gift cards and calling back with a serial number, you don't want to tell anybody. And I think the reasons are numerous. Some people are in denial. They just don't believe they've been victimized. Some people blame themselves or are ashamed. They think it was their fault. They blame themselves, blame the victim. If the scammer is someone known to the victim, there may, like a child or a grandchild, there may be a dependency or a codependency, a loyalty. But here's something that I've come to realize over the years is a major reason why victims are reluctant to tell. I gave a speech a few years ago upstate, and one of the scams I talked about was the grandparent scam, which I'll be talking about more in a few minutes. And afterwards, a woman came up to me and she said that she had been victimized by the grandparent scam. She had lost $3,000. And then she started hugging and thanking me. And I couldn't figure out why she was doing that. So I asked, and she said, Gary, you're the first person I've ever told that I got victimized by this grandparent scam. And it feels so good, she said, to finally get this off my chest. And I said, really? You didn't tell your adult children? You didn't tell your grandson about what happened? And she looked at me and she said, oh no, if they knew what had happened, they'd think I'm losing it mentally. It's time to take over my finances, maybe to put me in assisted living. She said, I'd rather suffer the loss of money in silence than risk the loss of self-control, of self-independence that I fear would happen if I told anybody. And I think that's a common reason why older victims are reluctant to tell. Now, it feels terrible not to tell anyone that you've been victimized by a crime. This woman was so appreciative of the opportunity to finally tell me, but it eats away at people and it's really unfortunate. Now, scammers follow the headlines. And so you're going to hear me talk about how they're tailoring their scams to the pandemic. But if there's one misconception about scams I want to disabuse you of right now, it's that people think that scammers are trying to outsmart us and that victims are stupid. The reality is that what scammers are really trying to do is to press our emotional buttons, to make us feel a strong emotion and then to react on that emotion without thinking. They try to take our brain out of the equation, so to speak, and they're good at it. And I think the best example that I can give you about the fact that it's not about intelligence is to briefly talk about the biggest con artist in the history of the United States of America. The guy sold $60 billion by running a Ponzi scheme. I'm talking, of course, about Bernie Madoff, who just died a couple of months ago. Madoff stole $60 billion from some of the smartest and wealthiest and most sophisticated individual and institutional investors in the country. So my takeaway is if these smart, sophisticated, wealthy institutional and individual investors could get tricked by Madoff, any of us could get defrauded if the scammer figures out the right emotional hook. Now, what Madoff used as his hook was greed. He offered much higher returns than you could get anywhere else. He offered guaranteed returns you couldn't get anywhere else. On some level, you would think that these very sophisticated investors would know better than that. It sounded too good to be true. But I think deep down, there's an element of greed in all of us. We all want to be the grand prize winner. We all want to pay the lowest price, and we all want the best return on our investment. So that's what Madoff took advantage of. And I just throw that as an example of that. It's not about intelligence, it's about emotions. If it seemed to you that the volume of robocalls that you were getting during the outset of the pandemic decreased, you're right, it did. Calls went down, we believe, by about 40% during the height of the pandemic. but they're now back about where they were beforehand. There have been 22 billion robocalls made in the United States so far this year. That comes to 67 calls for every man, woman, and child. And that figure was published a couple of days ago, so now it's probably 22.5 billion robocalls. What robocallers are going to try to do is they're going to start out with some emotional hook, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. They're going to try to make themselves trustworthy and believable or threatening, and then here's a red flag. They're going to tell us that there's an urgent deadline by which we must act. And if we don't, either something really bad is going to happen to us, or depending on the nature of the scam, we're going to lose this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for this great result. And that's a real red flag, because a legitimate offer that's put on the table today should still be on the table tomorrow. When someone tells you you've got to act immediately, it's a huge red flag, sign of a scam. And why do the scammers do that? Well, for starters, they want us to feel that emotion building up quickly, but also they don't want us to think about it. They don't want us to consult with our family. They don't want us to call our lawyer or our financial advisor or anybody. They want us to think we've got to act immediately. The most common phone scam in the history of the United States has been the so-called IRS scam, or the Internal Revenue Service scam, where the caller claims he's an IRS agent. He says, you owe back taxes, and if you don't pay us today, we're going to come and arrest you. Now, there are elements of that call that really don't make sense, right? First of all, does the IRS call people on the phone? No, they communicate in writing. Does the IRS threaten you with same-day arrest if you don't pay your taxes? Of course not. And does the IRS tell you to pay your taxes by going to a local store, buying gift cards, and calling back with a serial number? It almost seems laughable, right? You don't pay by gift card to the IRS, you write them a check. But if you don't know that this call is a scam and you get it out of the blue, what you're going to feel is fear. Here's a government employee telling you you're in trouble and you're going to get arrested. And if you're fearful, you may go and you may act without really thinking, now, wait a minute, the IRS doesn't call and they don't threaten immediate arrest. You're going to hear me talk repeatedly about gift cards because that has become the method of choice used by scammers to get money for victims. So I'm going to talk about that more later. But the IRS scam, it's been estimated, was working about 1 in 50 calls, which is good because 49 out of 50 people weren't falling for it. But when you multiply 1 in 50 times the millions of calls that were being made, it translated into many, many victims and many millions of dollars lost to the scam. But what we've seen in the last year or two, believe it or not, is a decrease in the IRS scam. And I think the reason is because so many people have either gotten that call or heard about that call that they're just not falling for it anymore. So during the pandemic, what we've seen is an evolution in the imposter scam. Instead of claiming to be an IRS agent, now more often they're claiming to be calling from the Social Security Administration. They start out by telling you there's a problem with your account. It looks like there's an issue here, but they need to confirm you're the customer they're trying to reach. So please give me your Social Security number. Now, when you think about it, the Social Security Administration has your social number, so they don't need you to provide it. But this is a scammer who's trying to get you to provide the social number so they can commit identity theft. So that's the main theme behind this scam. But sometimes they'll also say that there's a fee that you owe or a fine that you owe, and they'll tell you to go buy gift cards and call back with the serial numbers. So the Social Security scam is the call that's now become the most common of the imposter scams. Don't fall for it. The next scam I'm going to talk about is the one that I think gets me the angriest because it uses the love of a grandparent as the emotion to rip people off. I'm talking about the grandparent scam. This is a scam where usually the caller would call about 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning when grandma's asleep, doesn't have her wits about her. When you were asleep and you get a phone call in the middle of the night, do you expect it to be good news or bad news? It's probably bad news. And here comes the caller saying that he's your grandson, he's in big trouble, and he needs you to send money real quick. We're going to play a video in a moment made by Dr. Ruth Westheimer, the famous TV psychotherapist who almost fell victim for this scam. But typically what would happen is the caller doesn't even know the name of the grandson he's impersonating. So he'll start out by saying, "Hi, Grandma, it's me, your favorite grandson," hoping to prompt Grandma to give him a name to work with. He's got a name now, he's off to the races. He says, "Grandma, I'm in big trouble. I've been arrested for some reason, and I need you to send bail money fast." And Grandma, "Shh, please don't tell my parents. They'll kill me if they find out." Why does the scammer say that? For 2 reasons. One is, if Grandma calls her adult children or her grandson, they're going to tell her this is a scam. But also, it's that old saying, flattery will get you everywhere. In essence, what the fake grandson is saying to Grandma is, "Grandma, I trust you with my deep, dark secret of my arrest more than I even trust my own parents." And that's a very flattering thing for a grandparent to hear. So they're flattering Grandma as they're trying to rip her off. Sometimes Grandma would get suspicious about this call because the caller wasn't really the grandson, and it wouldn't sound necessarily like the grandson. And Grandma would say, "Hey, Johnny, you don't sound like yourself." they've got an answer for that. Don't worry about it. Oh, grandma, I've been in jail for 48 hours with nothing to eat or drink. Oh, grandma, I've had a cold the last few days. There's always a reason they have. But if grandma remains suspicious about the fact that the sound doesn't just match the voice of her grandson, the scammer will say, oh, grandma, let me put you on the phone with my attorney. Now he hands the phone off to his co-partner in crime, his co-scammer, someone grandma has never spoken with before. So it takes the voice recognition issue out of the equation. The fake attorney will then confirm the whole story, say he's been arrested, he won $3,000 in bail money, and then he ratchets up the pressure by saying, if you can get me the money today, I'll have your grandson home on a plane tonight. But if I don't get the money today, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 more weeks before we get in front of a judge, and your grandson will remain in jail during that time. And so there's tremendous emotional pressure on grandma to act. We're now going to play a video made. It's a public service announcement featuring Dr. Ruth Westheimer, who, as you'll hear her explain, came this close to falling for the scam. She was actually on her way to the store to buy the gift cards that the imposter had told her to buy, when luckily Dr. Ruth's daughter called her. And Dr. Ruth said kind of angrily, you know, your son got arrested and now I've got to bail him out. And Dr. Ruth's daughter said, he didn't get arrested. He's here with me right now. So Dr. Ruth luckily found out before she became a victim. So why don't we go to the public service announcement now?
Grandma, I love you so much and I never ever want to see you get hurt.
Hello?
Grandma, I need help.
There's a very pervasive telephone scam targeting older adults. It's called the grandparent scam.
We've had doctors and lawyers fall for this. It doesn't really matter what your educational level is because it triggers something emotional that causes you to act.
The other morning, I got awoken. The phone rings and somebody says, this is your grandson. Please don't tell my parents. But we got arrested last night in a rented car. They found drugs, and I need bail.
When I heard you were in trouble, I went to the bank, bought the cards, and sent them out. I thought that I was doing a good thing.
This is a preventable scam if people know about it. And in particular, we've tried taking an intergenerational approach by working with students at the high school level to enlist them to be fraud fighters to warn their own parents and grandparents about the scam.
Grandma, don't fall for the scam, please. I care about you. I don't want your money getting taken away ever again.
Say words to the effect of, hey grandma, if you get a call this summer from someone who says it's me and that I'm in trouble and you need to send money quickly, ask me some questions that only I would know the answer to.
Grandma, what was the name of our first dog?
If I don't call you Grandma Vita, it's not me.
What was my first word I said when I was a baby?
If you ask me about my hair and I say that I have it, it's not me.
Don't listen to the caller. They'll try to isolate you. Do everything you can to verify that the problem is legitimate before you send money. The goal is that everybody becomes aware of this scam so it simply won't work anymore. Maybe there's a grandparent who doesn't get out much, but a word from that person's grandchild might make all the difference in saving them from becoming a victim of the scam. Now, if there's an evolution in the scam that we're seeing during the pandemic, excuse me, it's that it's become more targeted. Often now the caller knows the name of the grandson, knows the name of the grandparent, and also rather than pretending to be the grandson, the caller is now often claiming to be a court official, a bail bondsman, or police officer, calling about the grandson who's been arrested and saying, you need to try to bail him out. Also, instead of telling grandma to go to a store and buy gift cards now, oftentimes these scammers are either coming to pick up the money themselves or they're arranging for a courier to do so, which is a scary development in the scam because essentially it's putting the victims in direct personal contact with either with a stranger or with a scammer. We think the reason that the scammers have switched tactics a bit is because during the pandemic, many older adults would be reluctant to go to a store to buy gift cards. They don't want to go in any store at all. But the scammers figure that they probably have a few $100 in the house that they could use, or they'd be willing to bail out their beloved grandson by going to the ATM and withdrawing some money. So beware of this scam, the grandparent scam. It's a terrible scam. It really upsets the victims. I think it literally shortens their lives because of the emotional distress. Foreign lottery scams have been around for years. You get an email or a phone call or a text, and it says you've won the lottery in a foreign country. But before they can send you the winnings, you've got to send them the taxes in advance. Of course, if you send them the tax money in advance, you'll never see the winnings. And by the way, I've never won the lottery, but if you do,
They withhold the winnings from your taxes. You don't pay the taxes separately in advance. You should also know that it's illegal to sell foreign lottery tickets in the United States. So that right there is a huge tip-off. We've seen an uptick during the pandemic of the so-called utility scam, where the caller claims he's from the local utility, that you're behind in your bill and they're going to cut off the electricity today unless you run out and buy gift cards and call back with a serial number. We think the reason this scam has picked up during the pandemic is because people are in financial distress, a lot of them, and maybe they are behind on their bill or they're worried about falling behind on their bill. And so this emotion has particular resonance. The scammers are trying to figure out what are the type of emotions that people are feeling during the pandemic: fear of COVID, fear of financial distress. All those kind of things are fertile ground for scammers. So the caller says he's from the utility and you owe money and you better pay up quick. I learned through my own personal experience just how compelling a scam and how compelling a call this can be. My mother, my beloved mother, passed away a year ago, but a couple of years before that, she was living with my son in Manhattan, and she called me one day sounding more hysterical than I have ever heard her sound in her entire life. She was screaming into the phone. And what she said is that Con Ed had called. She lived in Manhattan, the local utility. She was $800 behind on her electrical bill. And unless she went out and bought gift cards and called back with a serial number, they were going to turn off the electricity. And it happened to be a 95-degree day in August, so she was screaming, "I can't go without the electricity." I spent about 10 minutes trying to calm her down. I said, "Mom, it's a scam. You've heard me talk about it. You know this is a scam." And she screamed, "It's not a scam. They gave me a callback number and I called them back and they confirmed that I owe the money." So I didn't know the exact phone number for Con Ed, but I knew it was something like 1-800-CON-ED something. So I asked her, what was the callback number? And she said it was a 917 number. And so I realized, I said, "Mom, the scammers gave you their own cell phone number, that burner phone that they'll throw out when they're done with the case, to get you to believe that it's the real thing." Finally, after about 10 or 15 minutes, I calmed her down and she realized it was a scam. Luckily, she called me as she was on the way to the local Dwayne Reed that the scammers had told her to go to buy the gift cards to pay the electrical bill. And when she had finally calmed down, I pointed out something to her. You know, I mentioned earlier that my son was living with her, and to defray those expenses, he was paying the Con Ed bill online automatically every month. She wasn't even paying the Con Ed bill anymore. And so I said that to my mother, and she said, "Oh, Gary, I feel so stupid." But I explained to my mother it wasn't about stupidity. They had scared her. They had made her afraid of losing electricity on one of the hottest days of the year in August, and that really just made her go into a panic. So the utility scam can be a very compelling scam. Be on the lookout for it. We've seen an uptick in charity scams during the pandemic because we all want to be generous. We all want to help people in need, but the scammers are trying to take advantage of our generosity. So before you make a charitable contribution, make sure the charity is legitimate. Look it up online. Go to the AG website for charities, charitiesnys.com. That's charities, one word, charitiesnys.com. Look up the charity. Make sure it's registered. Make sure you're going to make a legitimate donation to a real charity before you contribute. And be especially wary of telephone solicitations, particularly from a charity you haven't dealt with before. It's possible the caller is an out-and-out scammer just trying to rip you off. But even if the caller is a real telemarketer or a real fundraiser calling on behalf of a real charity, on average, the fundraiser keeps about a third of the money you donate over the phone. So if you want to support a charitable organization, you'd be better off to make a direct contribution, send them a check directly, go on their website, make a contribution directly, avoid contributing over the phone. The tech support scam has grown in popularity, or frequency, I should say, during the pandemic. This is the scam where the caller says he's from Microsoft or Google or Apple, some tech company. He says your computer is broken or running slowly, which most people feel their computer is running slowly. And he says, if you can give me remote access to your computer, I'll fix it for you. And if you as the victim go to your computer and follow his instructions and give him remote access to your computer, what the scammer will then do is put ransomware on your computer. They'll lock you out of your own computer unless you pay up by getting gift cards and calling back with a serial number. And there's really no way to free your computer from this if you don't pay up. So you want to be very, very careful about ever giving anyone remote access. And what's interesting about the tech support scam is that whereas most of these phone scams are estimated to work about 1 in 50 calls, the tech support scam is estimated to work about 1 in 6 calls. This is a scam that works. And the emotional button being pushed isn't quite as clear either. I mean, for the IRS scam, it's fear. For the grandparent scam, it's love. What's the emotional button being pushed in the tech support scam? What I think it is that we all use and rely on computers, but we don't really know how they work. And we feel uncomfortable about that. And we feel inadequate and uneasy. And that's the sense that the scammers are trying to take advantage of. Unfortunately, we've also seen an uptick during the pandemic in romance scams because a lot of people are socially isolated, they're lonely, and they want to go online and reach out and meet somebody. And so here's how it works. If an older adult posts a profile on one of these matching type websites online or apps, there unfortunately are predators out there laying in wait to see an older adult post a profile. They have their own fake profile on file. They reach out to the person who just filed their new profile and start engaging in all kinds of lovey-dovey text messaging and emailing, and they're making the person feel like they've really met a new source of love and compassion in their life. It's easing the loneliness. There's usually an excuse given as to why they can't come visit in person for a period of time. I have a medical condition, a business to run or something. And then inevitably comes the ask for money. And all too often, victims will send money willingly. And what's really scary and disturbing about the romance scam is, well, let me put it to you this way. If someone calls the AG's office and says, I got a call from somebody who says he's an IRS agent, and we tell that person it's a scam, they're relieved, they're pleased, they're happy. But when you tell someone they're being victimized in the romance scam, you're bursting their emotional bubble. You're telling them that this new source of love and compassion in their life, this person who's making them feel less lonely, is a scammer. And all too often, people just don't want to believe it, and they will simply keep giving the money. And I know families that have had to resort to self-help to put a stop to it or try to put a stop to it. Check the mail on the way in and out. Change the password on the computer. Change the cell phone number of the older adults so that it's not easy for the scammers to keep calling her back. You sometimes have to resort to this because romance scams can be very easy to fall into and very hard to get out of. Which is why, by the way, if you know somebody, an older adult who's thinking of going online to meet someone else, it's really important to have this conversation with them before they start. If you warn them in advance of the possibility of meeting a scammer, they're going to be safer than if they have no idea. They meet someone and then you're first trying to tell them this could be a scammer. People oftentimes don't want to hear it. You've heard me mention gift cards several times now today, that they're the method of choice used by scammers. Up until a couple of years ago, more often what scammers were doing was telling you to go to the bank or to a Western Union or other company like that and wire the money. But what's happened is that the banks and the Western Unions have now trained their tellers pretty well so that if you go in and you say, my grandson got arrested or the IRS called, they're going to warn you that this is a scam. That's why the scammers have switched tactics and gone to the gift card, because the likelihood that when you go to a store to buy a gift card, the cashier is going to ask you why you're buying them or ask you anything about them is much less. And so that's become the method of choice. It's gotten so bad that the Federal Trade Commission has made it illegal for anyone over the phone to request payment by wire transfer, prepaid debit card, or gift card. So think of it this way: gift cards should be made to make gifts, not to pay legal obligations. So you're getting all these phone calls. What can you try to do to stay safe? Well, ground rule number one is to think of the telephone as a one-way street. And by that, we mean it's only safe to give information out over the phone if you made the call to a number that you know to be the real legitimate number of your bank, your credit card company, a government agency, et cetera. When somebody calls you, you simply can never be sure that they are who they say they are. And so, for example, if I got a call and the caller said, it's American Express calling, it looks like there are some unauthorized charges in your account, what I would do is hang up the call, get out my credit card, look up the toll-free number, and dial it. Now, when the person answers the phone, I know for sure I'm talking to an American Express employee. That first call, maybe yes, maybe no. What scammers do to make their calls seem more believable is they use a technology that's readily available called caller ID spoofing. They can make your caller ID say whatever they want it to say. So if the caller is claiming to be an IRS agent, they can make your caller ID say IRS, Internal Revenue Service, or actually even display the phone number of the IRS. If the caller is claiming to be your grandson who got arrested in Montreal, Canada, the scammer can make a Montreal, Canada phone number appear in your caller ID. So caller ID spoofing is used by scammers to try to make their calls more believable. What we suggest you do, though, is to use caller ID as a screening tool and simply don't answer the phone unless you recognize the number. It's not a perfect solution. A couple of years ago, the Attorney General was calling me on my cell phone. I didn't have her number. I didn't pick up. She then left a voice message and I called her back and we had a good laugh about how I was practicing what I preach. But if it's a legitimate caller, like the one I got from the Attorney General, they'll leave a message. If it's a scammer, they probably won't. And even if they do, you can easily delete it. So simply don't answer the phone unless you recognize the number. Sometimes people say to me, Gary, here's what I like to do. When I see a number on caller ID that I don't recognize, I do answer the phone. I talk gibberish and nonsense for 10 or 15 minutes. I waste the scammer's time, and then I go, ha ha, and I hang up. This is really not a good idea for a couple of reasons. One is that you just wasted 10 or 15 minutes of your own time. But more importantly, the computers that generate these calls can tell if a live voice answers. And if so, they will keep calling that number even more, and they may sell your number to other scammers to call you too. If you don't answer, you can hope eventually that your number falls off their list. The point being that the more of these calls you answer, the more you're going to get. And the fewer you answer, the fewer you're going to get, although it certainly won't stop at the fewer you're going to get. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago. I went to bed. I put my cell phone on the bureau next to me, but I forgot to turn it off. And at about midnight, the phone rang. I saw it was a number I didn't recognize, so I turned the ringer off and I tried to go back to sleep. Over the course of the next 10 minutes, my phone just kept ringing over and over and over and over again, sometimes with that same number from the first call and sometimes with different numbers. And what I think they were trying to do is get me so angry and so frustrated that I would answer the phone eventually just out of anger or frustration. I didn't do it. I turned the phone off eventually and went to sleep. As more and more of us are not answering the phone unless we recognize the number, the scammers are using a technique called neighbor spoofing. They spoof a number on your caller ID that's in the same area code and same exchange as your number, and they hope you're going to think it's a neighbor or a local business or something like that and answer the phone on that basis. So again, don't answer the phone unless you recognize the whole number. They're also using a trick called same number spoofing. They'll caller ID spoof your number, and they'll hope you think, can you butt dial yourself and answer the phone out of curiosity? No, you can't dial yourself. Don't fall for that. Phone providers are now doing more to try to protect us from these calls. Many of them now will warn you. You'll see a message that says potential spam when a call starts ringing. What they're telling you in essence is that the caller ID spoofing technique was being used here, that the number that originated the call was not the same number that you would have seen on caller ID. That's a good reason not to answer the call. There are other carriers that are providing some free and some for a monthly fee additional call blocking services. There are also third-party, meaning not phone company apps, but third-party apps. I'm not endorsing any product, but just to mention a couple of the more well-known ones, Nomo Robo, Nomorobo, Robo Killer are just two of the more popular apps. And what they do is they monitor your incoming calls. And if they can tell that it's a spam or a robocall, you hear one ring and the call goes dead. I choose not to use one of those apps. I just try not to answer the phone if I don't recognize the number. People often ask, is it worth signing up for the Do Not Call registry? Because I'm signed up and I'm still getting calls. And the answer is yes and no. The Do Not Call registry you can sign up for online at donotcall.gov. And what it means is that with a couple of exceptions, telemarketers have to stop calling you 31 days after you register your phone. The two main exceptions, by the way, are political campaign calls and charitable solicitation calls. All other commercial telemarketing calls are barred. And the law is effective at getting legitimate American US-based companies not to call you if you're on the Do Not Call list. But what it does not do, unfortunately, is deter scammers calling from anywhere in the world from calling you because they're using caller ID spoofing. And even if you report the password, the number you saw in your caller ID, it wasn't the real number that called you anyway. And so it does not deter the scammers. So should you sign up or stay signed up? Yes, it's going to help in some ways, but not in others. We're also seeing an uptick during the pandemic in email phishing scams. You get an email that looks like it's from your bank or government agency or something like that, and they want you to respond by clicking on the link and going to their website. And if you do click on the link, you're going to go to a fake lookalike website where you're then going to be asked for things like your social security number, your password, and other personal identifying information. Before you ever click on a link in an unsolicited email, it's not a reply to an email you sent, it's an unsolicited email. Be very careful. Put your mouse cursor over the line in the email where they want you to log back onto their website so you can see if it's really Citibank or whether it's some scammer. You can see what the actual website is. We're also seeing an increase in phishing done by text message. It's called smishing. And in particular, we're seeing these related because so many people are shopping online to deliveries. You're getting a text message or an email. It looks like it's from Amazon or FedEx or somebody like that. And they now want you to click on a link, respond, and either pay a fee or provide personal identifying information. So be on the lookout for that one. As more and more of us are shopping online and have online accounts, the importance of having safe passwords has become even more important. And I think what happens as we get older is we worry about not being able to remember our password. And so we tend to choose something easily remembered, like the name of a grandchild or the name of a child. And the problem is that any password that can be Googled about you easily is not a safe password. People will go online, they'll go on social media, they'll see if they can figure out what your password is. So think of a password that you can remember, but nobody else can figure out. One piece of advice we give is think of a poem or a song or a figure of speech you'll never forget and make an acronym out of the first letter of each word. So for example, President Lincoln, his Gettysburg Address began 7 years ago. If you could make an acronym out of that, FSA, SYA, maybe add a number and an exclamation point. Even if you can't remember FSA, SYA, as long as you can remember 7 years ago, you'll be able to recreate your password. My mother's Gmail password for many years was the first letter from the line in Shakespeare. To be or not to be, that is the question. And then she had a number and an exclamation point. If I asked her to spit out her password, she couldn't do it. But when she sat down on her iPad, she could type it out, the letters, first letter of each of those words, and it's a technique that worked for her. The last thing I want to say about the online, and then I'll open it up to questions, is that another vulnerability that many of us have is the security question that we answer when we open an account. In case we forget our password, we're prompted to ask the security question. You want to pick a question, the answer to which cannot be easily Googled and searched online about you. So for example, if your security question is city of birth or mother's maiden name, those are not the questions you want to use, because what scammers will sometimes do is, if they have your username, they'll put your username in, they'll put in some gibberish passwords to prompt the security question, and then see if they can Google the answer to it about you online. And if they can, then they can get in your account and they can change the password and lock you out. So you want to scroll down and choose one of the questions that you'll know the answer to, but which can't be Googled about you. What was the name of your favorite athlete as a kid? What was the name of your pet dog? Where'd you go to elementary school? Something like that is a much safer security question to use. So I know we've only got a few minutes left, David. So at this point, I'm glad to take any questions that people may have. And thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you so much, Gary Brown. So just to remind everybody, we don't actually right now have very many questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'd like to introduce now Barry Langer. He's our go-to guy for the Q&A. He's been looking through all of the things that are coming up. I know we just got a question, Barry. So Barry is a volunteer with the DIF to Bill Payer program. He's a regular Q&A host for our series, and he will take it away. Go ahead, Barry.
Yes, hi everybody. Gary, that was a fabulous talk. I was thinking about all the things that I may do or suggest to do, and you've covered 100% of those. So I think that may be one of the reasons why we haven't got a lot of questions in chat. We've got a number of people who thought this was great, and in fact, the word needs to be spread. I know you speak a lot, and there are some senior centers that are here. They've been invited, but other ways to get the word out would be helpful. I don't know if there are things that are printable from your website, for example, that senior centers can use to get to folks that are not on this.
That's a great question, Barry. Our website address is ag.ny.gov, and we've got a wealth of information about all the things I talked about today. You can also file a complaint online, again, at ag.ny.gov.
Very good. A person asked for your office's number. David did put it in the chat, but in case people missed it, how can they reach you with specific issues or problems?
You can call us toll free at 1-800-771-7755. That's 1-800-771-7755.
Somebody did put a question here that they actually get a notice from their landline, from their provider, that says scam lightly, just scam likely. And they just wonder how they know that. I think you kind of gave part of that answer. Maybe.
Yeah, the carrier can tell if the call is using caller ID spoofing. And if it is, that's when they warn you that it's likely a scam.
Okay. So I really kind of
why would a legitimate caller try to conceal the origin of the call by using caller ID spoofing?
Yeah. I have an iPhone, and there's a setting in there that's called silence unknown callers. So if the person's not in my contacts, it automatically goes to voicemail. So that's kind of what you do, which is you ignore it, except the phone is ringing.
Yeah.
But that's something I think only Apple provides.
Yeah, and I have iPhones too, and I don't use that service, Barry, although it's really a personal choice. The reason I don't is that occasionally I do get a call from someone that I want to take their call. I don't have their name and number in my address book. I'm waiting for a doctor to call me back or something like that. And I want to be able to answer those calls.
Yeah, it's you know, I appreciate how annoying these are, that you can get them, like you said. They do seem to come in runs where all of a sudden you get 5 or 6 in a row.
Yeah.
We have a question here.
Yes, I see it. Yeah, okay, Dave.
Are scams investigated? Are scammers getting caught, prosecuted, or are they mostly overseas operations?
It's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer is they're mostly overseas. They're very hard to catch. And even in the rare instances when they do get caught, money almost never gets recovered, which is why prevention is really the key here. You've got to learn how the scammers are working so you don't become a victim in the first place. I'm not saying that they never get caught, but if they're operating overseas, particularly depending on what country they're operating from, it can be very, very hard to stop them.
A person says that if the phone rings and there's no one there when you answer, is that a form of scam?
Sometimes what they do is they call you, and the reason there's no one there is because picture, there's a guy sitting at a computer screen and they're making 100 calls at once. And then when you answer your phone, it takes the guy a moment to connect to your line because he's waiting to see who answers. That's why there's often a delay momentarily when you get these calls between when you answer and when they start talking, I should say.
So it's a sign that the computer is calling you, right? That's really what
it's a sign that it's a computer generated call. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've been through it, so we should just do like a last call for questions or comments.
Another
one came in?
Yes.
All right, let me see.
From
Or am I not seeing it?
From Phyllis.
Can you read it? Because I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. When you buy a new computer, what should you buy to provide the best security? What kinds of things should you buy? And she's not looking necessarily for a specific brand.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell you a specific brand, I wouldn't be allowed to, but you definitely want to have very strong antivirus security software on your computer. It's really a must nowadays. If you don't have that on your computer, you're kind of a sitting duck for all the scammers who are out there. So, you know, go to the computer store, there's different softwares and antivirus software you can buy, anti-malware software, very important to do.
Another question just came in. The person has heard that you should not answer by saying hello because they record your voice. Is there anything to be said about the voice recording?
Yeah, we thought at first that was the reason they were trying to prompt people to say hello, that they would record your voice and then use that to order products in your name. But what we've come to realize is that the reason they say hello, all they want to do is see what time of day you're answering the phone. It's like a test call. So if you answer the phone at 7 o'clock, they know that's the time to keep calling you. If you don't answer at that time, they'll try again. But that's what's behind those calls. They're testing out what time of day you answer the phone. Fine-tuning their scammery.
Gary, I had a question. There seems to be some connection between a scam where they're calling about your car warranty, and when you actually get connected to the line, it's taking you to a completely different company. Is that a normal thing that someone's telling you one thing and then you're connected to something completely different?
It's very common robocall, the extended warranty call. They're trying to get you to buy an extended warranty on your car, which probably isn't worth it, probably isn't going to cover your needs anyway. So be very wary of that. And it's certainly a cause for concern if you start out talking to one company and next thing you know, you're on the phone with another.
We also have a housing question for you. What can you do when it's housing that is overcharging you, especially for rent, especially due to COVID? Can landlords jack up the prices for your rent during COVID?
There's no blanket answer to that. It's going to depend on whether you're rent regulated, rent controlled, rent stabilized, or free market. So I can't give a blanket answer to that. But if you're a rent regulated tenant, you can file a complaint with the Division of Housing and Community Renewal, that's DHCR, and they'll see if they can help you.
Okay, I think we're getting, we have some more, we have a couple
more. That was a repeat. Well, the next one was just the question we just answered about answering with yes. Let's see what else just came in.
I have a couple questions are coming in. Here's one. My mom recently received a phone call from a person who was alleging that he was calling from Virginia from a medical center. he was asking him for information that they would send a plastic Medicare card to substitute for a paper Medicare card. Is
sure
this
sounds
practice?
It sure sounds like a scam to me. I haven't heard of that call before, but it sounds almost certainly like it was a scam. And again,
somebody also wrote
that person should think of the phone as a one-way street. In other words, don't respond to someone who calls you out of the blue, no matter where they say they're from. If you want to confirm the validity of it, do some research, independently get the legitimate phone number, and then call them back.
Somebody writes, if you receive a letter from the Department of Labor with an incorrect yearly income, is that a sign of identity theft or a scam?
Could be. You'd have to reach out to the Department of Labor.
Okay, well, I think that unless we're doing a final call for questions, we love having you, Gary. You're always giving us new insight into the mind of the people that are scamming us, or they're potentially trying to scam us. And you're always letting us know the latest scams to be careful for. Again, everybody, I'm just letting you know, you will receive by Friday information that was given today, and a survey and resources that Gary will provide, along with all of our other resources. A copy of this of this video will be available within 5 days. It takes them some time to edit it, and there'll be a link for you to click on so you can see this talk or any of the other talks that we have done over the last year. We do have one or two more questions here. Let me look at those.
People certainly want the information posted, which I think you just said they'll be getting the information by email.
Yes, and again, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for our 3-part Medicaid, fantastic Medicaid series with New York Legal Aid Group and Valerie Bogart. So thanks all. Thanks again, Gary. Thanks to PSS, our partners, for making this such an amazing experience. Thank you for all participating, and we look forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Barry. Stay safe, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gary. You too. Take care. Good day, everyone.